All right, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Cultish Entering the Kingdom of the Cults. My name is Jeremiah Roberts, one of the co-hosts here. Here with Andrew, the super sleuth of the show. I'm here with Brother Wade. Good to see you both back. We've had a long week in Utah, and we are wrapping things up with a little epic two-part podcast talking about Mormons, swing dancing, ghost hunting, all the above, getting very, very interesting. A whole broad variety of topics. So we're here with Jared Fawcett. Good to see you again, man. Welcome back. For everyone else, for us, it's like kind of like Narnia. It's like longer time there versus here. However you do it. Somehow the time zones are off. Yeah. But for us, it was 5 minutes. For you all, it was a week. Or whatever. Maybe if you're watching this, you get to watch the whole thing together. However we put it on film. But all that being said, we were jumping right back into the podcast. People started getting intrigued. Now we made them for a week, so I don't want people hate on me any much longer. So. We're back, and we are talking about ghost hunting and just jumping back into it. So just tell us a little bit more about the times being there. Go ahead.
So with ghost hunting, so we would go out usually weekly, and places would reach out to us. What our team was known as is the Idaho Spirit Seekers was the name of it, but it was a TAPS organization, and just places would reach out. Some businesses would release the names and everything afterwards. It's really up to them, because some places will end up losing business because it's haunted. Right. Some places will actually gain business because it's haunted. But they have to play that role accordingly. And we would just go out and, like I said, I was listening, and then I'd spend a decent chunk of my week listening to hours upon hours of audio, listening for voices and unexplained sound.
Trying to hear things through the white noise of different frequencies.
Bunch of white noise.
Yeah, that movie. Sorry.
Bad. I never seen. Is it bad?
Yeah, don't watch it. As a Christian, I can tell you it's too real. It's too on point.
Wow.
It was so on point that when it was actually for my birthday, me and my adopted mom, we actually went and saw it. This was while I was ghost hunting and doing those things, and while watching it, I'm like, that was actually a weird experience. You had asked me about a weird experience. That was weird because I was watching it and there was like evil spirits in that movie. And the temperature in the room dropped in the movie theater, and they couldn't, like, no matter how hot they would turn it up, it stayed cold.
Wow.
And stuff like that. And I was like, I don't like this. This is too close to reality. This is not, like, and they're dealing with, like, at least the spirits I was dealing with, I know they're demons now, but at least they weren't usually overly hostile. It was just, they were just talking. Yeah. Versus that movie that was like,
they're trying to get you.
I was like, I don't like this at all.
Well, yeah, I mean, you think about it too, like there's a lot of stories about when they were filming The Exorcist, a lot of really strange things happened on set, which does make sense, because regardless, it doesn't really matter the theology of the person who's opening that door. If you are practicing something, this is just, regardless of your intentions, it's bad news. Yeah. That's just the way that God made things. God created all things visible and invisible. And it's like the law of gravity. You cross over into this path, regardless of your intentions, something else is going to be on the other side, or at least opening up a portal as to do so.
Yeah, and so I had a really good time with the brothers, and it was mostly men. We had a few women in the group too, and we would go everywhere. We go. Some of the longer trips were like clear to Wyoming and those, but a lot of them were more close. So we had like Twin Falls or Soda Springs in areas that were around Pocatello that we would go to a lot of the times and do those. And like I said, 90% of what people would consider paranormal is debunked, just to save the audience. If you think you have a haunting, look for loose floorboards or get yourself an EMP meter. They're actually fairly cheap. Mm-hmm. And see how much is running in your house. If you have an older house, you might need to shield your wires.
Yeah. This reminds me of when I was in high school. I had a little band, and we were looking for a new drummer. Okay, we went to the drummer's house to practice. All right, and we walked in, and they had like a garage that they had kind of even walled off and put drywall in for like practicing for their kid. So we were considering making this kid our new drummer for our band. So we walk in, and the family goes, we're glad you're here. We don't want to alarm you, but we tell everyone who comes in here, we do have 2 ghosts that live in our home. One is a small boy, and he's very friendly. He'll just come up to you every once in a while. Don't be too worried about him. But then there's the older man who can really try to frighten you. He loves to really frighten and trick, and even put on new faces for newer people. So we also don't recommend you sleep over for a while till they get used to you. And me and my other band members were like,
Out.
what are we doing here? But we ended up practicing a little bit. But
The things you'll sacrifice for a practice space?
Yeah. Oh, when you're
I was in a band. I
Yeah.
get it.
Like, no, this is really nice, but man, I don't want that ghost coming out. But anyways,
That's whack.
your stories remind me of that. It's like,
Well, and I
people
wonder,
have all this
Right.
in their daily life. I guess some people believe, or they do have some sort of demonic spirit living with them. I don't know. So
Yeah.
Well, and I've been in places where, I can honestly say that they're probably being oppressed. Like,
yeah,
it's darker, it's colder, and they'll have religious people come and like pray over the home, and then it's better.
Right.
So
I have a question too, because you're talking about how 90% of this stuff is debunked, right?
Yeah.
But there's something about the frequencies or the EMPs that is somehow able to track what is going on, or at least sort of seeing the barrier between the seen and the unseen realm. Like, of all things, like what's the uniqueness behind EMPs or those sort of frequency
EVP.
detectors?
So EMP is it just senses so you have electromagnetic fields in any room. It's really bad. That's why a lot of people will experience issues if they live like right underneath power lines. If you live like right underneath a power line, that's usually bad because those are unshielded wires.
can give you like headaches. And
Headaches,
stuff like that.
make you feel sick. People have hallucinated.
Interesting. Okay.
So it's a level. But there's 10% that you just can't explain. And that's really that's why they would call us is, well, what's this 10%? And that's, if you watch Ghost Hunters and watch any of those shows, that's where they'd be like, well, we heard this voice, we heard this thing. And that's what we got from it. If you are experiencing voices, I can honestly tell you should probably just have your pastor come and
Pray over the house.
pray over the house.
Yeah.
Don't mess around with that
Right.
stuff because it's not.
Yeah.
It's not.
Don't provoke.
Provoke. Yeah.
Whatever's there.
And that's why I have a tough time talking. Like some people who've been around me, even here, they're like, I didn't even know you were a ghost hunter. I'm like, I don't really talk about it a lot because some people can get overly fascinated with it.
Yeah.
And then they're like, I want to go do it. I'm like,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah, and that's what we're doing.
dangerous.
And that's what we're doing here. I mean, we're not trying to exalt, we're not going like, hey, by the way, this is brought to you by www.ghosthuntingutah.com, like,
No.
or whatever. If that ends up being a website, don't go to that. But
there is ghost hunting
Yeah.
groups in Utah.
right,
Yeah.
there probably are. But what we're trying to do, and I think we've done this before previously with Cultish, is that especially whether you're talking with someone who's in the New Age or someone who comes out of it, is that you are. Like you have to be able to make sense of a point of reference, because if you just sort of say, well, this is just all in your head and you're making this up, that's going to lose any sort of relatability of what they went through, or if you're talking with someone in the New Age. And so we can understand that there's an explainable basis for like why this was appealing to you for you in Mormonism.
Oh, it was totally appealing. And the thing is it was totally accepted too. Nobody warned against it. And it was totally, their big thing was, well, as long as you're praying before you do it and you pray after, so you don't have anything following you.
Mm.
Any type of experience that you can relate to making Mormonism true is a good thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and where the spirit realm is here, it makes perfect sense. Where if you read in the Old Testament, and I can't remember which person it was who was like, I want to go back and warn people, and they're like, well, you can't speak to the living.
Oh, Luke 16, the rich man and Lazarus.
Yeah, you can't speak to the living, you're dead.
Right.
And so,
It's a chasm.
reading that now, I go, okay, well, there's no possibilities that I was actually speaking to anything other than a demonic force.
Right.
And it helps me know that.
Or even that girl who is singing the faces of angels.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, and there's something too when especially
Well, if she was seeing a real angel, she'd be really afraid.
Yes, devils definitely. The shepherds were sore
yeah,
for
that's
that.
good.
I'll be a little scared too.
Well, you notice that every time an angel appears in the Bible, the first thing that they always say, no matter what, is, be not afraid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's because they don't look nice.
Yeah.
So if they appear, it's like, demon. They're like, be not afraid.
Or just super
I
holy and
Yeah.
it's...
But I think that's one reason that you don't have, I mean, being a cessationist, I think that's one reason that God doesn't really use the angels as much anymore. Because he doesn't want to scare people off.
Right. No, that's interesting, man. And I think also, like I said, we're just looking. We're acknowledging the fact that there's an unseen realm. But I think also, going into your story, and I'm curious to see where it unravels, is that
Sure.
There is a lot of times, whether it's in the New Age or in your particular case, almost a sort of pride and identity in the fact that I have the ability to sort of contact this 10% of what is legit. I have this ability to detect it, so therefore I'm something special. In the same way, people who have the ability to astral project or lucid dream or to be able to do mediumship and be tapped in and have knowledge about something, really thinking it's something of themselves, unbeknownst, that's actually because you are unknowingly really a slave to the unseen realm, as far as the hostile side of the isle is concerned.
Yeah, and that's true. And there was definitely pride in that.
Yeah.
And at the time, I have the conviction I really don't talk about it because, like I said, I don't want to encourage. But at the time, I'm like, I'm an EVP tech. Yeah, I go do this. I would brag about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I talk. Yeah. Oh, do you want to see some of the clips?
Yeah.
And you'd be like, dude, listen to this. Like,
Right.
check this out. And did you hear that voice? Did you hear him say yes?
Yeah.
Did you hear that
Yeah.
name? Did you hear?
Yeah. So did you continue to do this, or was there a point kind of like where the straw that broke the camel's back?
There was a
or
point where we went and saw, it was like this abandoned warehouse building. It was an older building in a town, and it was just a really dark place. And it actually made me kind of give up that whole thing because it reminded me too much of the thing that kept playing in the back of my head.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, I'm okay. You could justify a lot of it when you were going into houses and things like that because you were helping families. Like, these people were honestly scared and they're turning to you
For answers.
for answers and help. And you're like, okay, I'm helping people.
Yeah.
But just going into like abandoned buildings or something like that and doing it was like, who are we helping?
Yeah.
And having that dark force, that's what ended up getting me out of that. It was almost a replay of 15-16 again.
Was there like a kind of a rush doing this stuff? I mean,
a total rush.
Exhilarating.
It was,
because you were obviously still kind of frightened sometimes, I would imagine.
but you did get those adrenaline rushes when you would catch something. Like, it's almost, like when you're playing Clue and you get the right answer. It's a mystery, and you're getting it, and you're like, okay, no, I'm making progress.
It was Colonel Mustard. Yeah.
And you would get better at it too, because you get to the point where you could start because some of what you would hear on the audio was very faint, and when you first start out, you'd skip over that because you wouldn't hear it.
Yeah.
But you get to the point where you could pick out the faintest thing, and then you'd magnify it and be like, it's right here.
Yeah.
And
something I've always wondered is, sometimes when you're looking for something, you'll find it. So did you ever feel like, whether it was you or someone else investigating on your team, and someone hears something or a door closed or whatever, there's just this overwhelming excitement or a desire to want to produce. I want something to occur.
Oh, we would definitely want something to occur, and we'd set up cameras. Like we had like infrared cameras going through everywhere. We had and that was a big thing. Is you're sitting at the station like when you weren't out recording, watching the cameras. You're like, come on.
Did you guys ever bring in like Ouija boards or try to do seances?
No.
Or was that like a complete no-no?
So even in the LDS theology, Ouija boards are like
negative,
really bad. Like they're considered playing with the devil.
Were your team members?
A lot of them
diversity.
A lot of them were
still
LDS.
more. Wow.
So a lot of them.
So was there ever any inconsistency just kind of going along, and obviously we know there's a history behind Joseph Smith and his use of the occult. I mean, he was tried and convicted for glass looking, and his whole family was famous for their treasure digging. I mean, I'm thinking of like those classic like Red Dead Redemption 2 posters of the old businesses of so and so saloon or whatever. But imagine like this 1800s version of like Smith's family treasure digging,
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what he was famous and known for. But was there ever a time as you're doing this? I mean, like that sort of being a problem as far as just an inconsistency with that, or
no, and I think
I'm doing what the prophet did.
This is something that's just totally normal. Like occultism and spirituality and that kind of stuff is like New Age has a big foothold in Mormonism. Like law of attraction is considered to be like a gold standard within the Mormonism thing.
So almost like the frequencies and using those frequencies would have been like your and Thummim.
Yeah. I, like having the seer stone
to isolate voices from the frequencies
to see it and translate it. I mean that.
Did you say Uma Thurman? I love her.
Yeah. Just so you know, too, we just scarfed through 2 pieces, and it's a little later than we expected. So we're like,
sorry, everyone.
Thummim, so
yes. But yeah, so when I did that, so when I did leave and end up leaving ghost hunting behind, I mean, I still watched the shows. I still was, heavily like into that world, but I just didn't participate because I just don't want to. I will say when I was watching the shows, the people I respected more were the people who had a respect for it, if that makes sense. Then like Ghost Adventures on Travel Channel, I absolutely hated those guys because they were like constantly like provoking and like calling, and I'm like, you guys don't
overly cinematic.
I'm like, well, and it was what Wade was saying. If you really want something to happen, it will happen, and if you're provoking demonic forces, just wait. And things were always happening to him, and I'm like, well, it's because you're dumb. But the ones I respected most were actually the Tennessee Wraith Chasers, and I still don't know how they deal with the inconsistencies, because these guys are all like Southern like Christian boys, and they even like pray to Jesus, and they actually did a ghost hunt of the Exorcist house that they filmed it at, and they did an exorcism there of the house on like a Halloween and stuff, and I was like, I don't know how you are
how you reconcile
how are you reconciling it, but I can at least respect the fact that you're trying to do this from a somewhat Christian angle.
Right.
But of course this is before I was saved, but I'm like, I can see y'all are trying. But, and then I ended up, so when I left there, I got really trying to find my group again. I was still LDS, but I ended up kind of going inactive at that point. Because the group I hung around, and my claim to fame was ghost hunting. Right?
Yeah.
That was my claim to fame. And I was no longer a ghost hunter. So I went inactive. Anyway, so I joined this motorcycle group. And one of the guys in town who's the chaplain for the POWMIA group, his name's Rev. He's what he goes by as his road name. He picked the right road name to go by, and that's why everybody calls him as Rev. And the reason why it's a good name is his actual name is Jim Jones, unfortunately.
Right, I remember you telling us that. Yeah, we don't want to go by that.
Yeah, so he goes by Rev.
Yikes.
But he started a church there, and he was hosting a blessing of the bikes. he does it every year where he blesses all of the motorcycles of everybody who rides. Is like, keep them safe,
Safety,
keep them running.
Yeah.
Let's not have anything. And so I went with my group, not expecting anything, because I'm just like, yeah, I'll go. Why not?
Yeah.
Because at that point, it was post Gordon B. Hinckley coming out, and so Mormonism was pretty open to, we can just go to other faiths and just do things occasionally, no big deal.
Interesting.
That was the thing. And
Yeah.
when he blessed that bike, I felt a spirit off of him that I hadn't felt like for a long time. And I was like, wait, you're not Mormon.
Yeah, you shouldn't have that.
You don't have that stuff.
Yeah.
And I kind of had that too after this whole experience too. A family had come over that my dad became really good friends with because he was getting his PhD in political science. They're from Cameroon, and he was a Baptist from Cameroon.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember one day, like, he kind of did this too. His car broke down. His auto tran fluid had dropped out of his car right in the middle of his thing. And I'm sitting there and I'm mad for him because I'm like, wow, that sucks. And he's like, praise God. And I'm like, what? He's like, praise God, it happened here in the driveway and not on the freeway where I'm here safe. It's all good.
Right.
And I'm, buddy, what kind of faith do you have? I'm like,
Yeah.
I'd be kicking the car.
Right.
I'd be mad.
Yeah.
You're just, praise God, it happened here. Okay. But that happened, and then I meet up with Rev. And then I was like, okay, well, there's something different here. And everybody liked to call his church the biker church. And the reason why is there was more Harleys in the parking lot than there were cars. And so, and everybody would, and it was come as you are, so everybody would come in their cuts, which is the leather vest that you see them wear. So
Straight up biker church.
So everybody came in their cuts. And it was also known that no matter what allegiances you had, once you were in there, everybody was cool with everybody.
This was in Idaho?
This was in Idaho.
Yeah.
So I went there, and that's where I responded to an altar call one time when he's like, hey, who needs to be saved? Like, raise your hand.
Right.
And I just remember going, and I'm like, get down there. Like, why are you up?
Right.
Like, that doesn't happen. I'm good. I'm Mormon, dude. Like, what's my hand doing up? And I prayed, and I remember like feeling like this weight taken off
Wow.
after. And I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to get involved here. And I actually ended up becoming his worship pastor for a year and doing music and writing.
Well, it's just interesting too that you mentioned how, with all your time of ghost hunting, that you sort of had this awareness and sensitivity to the unseen realm. And this is just indicative of people that we've talked to who are in the New Age or in the occult, is that they have a sensitivity to it. And while they have it, and they all initially have it because they crossed over into something they shouldn't have done. But even in spite, it's always, God always uses and works all things out together for good, especially that being of the Reformed tradition for sure.
Yeah.
But I think that is very unique that you had sort of this sensitivity that there was a sort of like a releasing of the white noise upon this blessing.
Oh wow.
Yeah. And that's probably what I probably was being impressed pretty good at that point.
I bet, dude.
And then I ended up not staying. So my wife and kid, we had just had my middle son at that point, and they were young. Her bishop was basically telling her to leave me. And she was feeling like a single mom because she was taking them to the LDS church. She was still LDS.
Right.
And I was a worship pastor over here and doing all of this.
Interesting.
And really involved. I wish I used to joke with all the Mormons in town because they'd be like, you have to go to church for 3 hours. I'm like, what would that be like? I'm like, my Sundays are like 12 hours long. Because we go and we do a rehab facility, and then we do our service was at like 3 or 4, and then we actually had another service for the women's prison that night. So we would go up there and do that.
A long day, yeah.
And so then I get home, I'm like, 3 hours would be nice.
Right.
I'm like, I don't know what that's like.
Right.
But
so she was going to leave you.
so she was going to leave. And then I actually saw a talk by Brad Wilcox that sounded a lot like what Christian Grace is. And I said, well, maybe there's a spot for me to go back. And so I ended up going back.
Oh, going back to the
LDS church.
Yeah.
I'm like, maybe there's a spot for me, because that was the one thing that I really thought they had wrong was grace. That was my kind of sticking factor.
Yeah.
So
the LDS church was wrong, but then you heard Brad Wilcox.
And I'm like, maybe they're softening up. Maybe there's room. Maybe I understood it wrong. Because I always say I would love to be able to sit in a room with him for like an hour and just like talk about grace, because I think he's on the right path. He's actually the head of like the religious studies or whatever at BYU.
Mm.
He's one of the chairs. And I'm like, I'd love to get you in a room, because I'm like, you're really close, dude.
Okay.
Yeah, right.
you're really close. But I ended up going back, and then we moved down here for a job. And we were down here for about 2 years in Utah. We were down and then I started getting the pull again, and it all is around music. Like I said, music always played a huge role in everything in my life. We never stopped listening to K-Love, because I was really into that music, because I was a worship pastor. Worship music, this is what we listened to.
Contemporary Christian music.
Contemporary Christian, that was the thing. And the Rock and Road Show was coming into town. And so it was a $10 ticket. It was for Compassion International, but we're talking, we have Matthew West for King and Country, Social Club Misfits, Amy Grant, like
big names.
Skillet?
No. Although I have seen them live.
Yeah.
But when I saw them live, they were performing with Seven Dust and like.
That was epic.
Yeah. It was Seven Dust, Skillet, and like, I can't remember the other two. Pop Evil was one of them that they were performing with. And that was only like a year or so ago. Yeah. It was good. It was actually a decent show. John Cooper. Awesome.
Yeah.
No woke cookies here. So we went to that, and I felt again that connection, that spirit, and went, okay, I'm not feeling that anywhere. So weird enough, how I got turned on to the first Christian church I went to after that point was actually from a Mormon who's really extremely open theist. He actually went to Yale and got a theology degree. I don't know why he would do that as an LDS member, because they don't have paid clergy. I'm like, why would you go into debt to get a theology degree at Yale if you're not going to use it? Mm-hmm. And he was actually working on the Joseph Smith papers and everything too. Okay. And he's like, he listened to me and he goes, He's like, there's this place called Center Point. He's like, I think those are your people. He's like, I don't think the LDS are your people.
Really?
He's like, hearing you, he's like, but he was like really open. Like he was like almost pantheistic. Like he was kind of into Buddhism. He was kind of in this, in this and this and this. And he's like, no, these are your people.
List.
Like, yeah, he's like, these are your people. Just go be with your people. And I'm like, okay. So I went and told my wife, I'm like, I'm just going to do both, but I want to go for the music, and because they did contemporary Christian worship. Went, loved the music, loved the message.
Yeah.
And then we went to sacrament meeting that day. It was right after, so I go to first service there and then go to sacrament meeting. Mm-hmm. Sitting in a side pew, and they do sacrament or communion every sacrament meeting. That's why they meet. Mm-hmm. Because you actually renew your baptismal covenants. That's how you get rid of your sin, is by taking. So our row got skipped with the water out of nowhere. And that's really rare, because bishops usually watch to make sure everybody gets it. Mm-hmm. Or those who aren't supposed to take it, because if you're in sin, you're actually not supposed to take it. So they're watching to make sure that those people don't take it, and that the people who are supposed to take it get it.
Yeah.
So our row gets skipped. Mm-hmm. He totally misses it. But pretty much clear as day, the scripture comes to my mind that's like, I am the living water. Mm-hmm. And I had prayed before that. I said, God, tell me what to do, and I don't care what it is. Just let me know. Dangerous prayers. If you're going to pray these things, just expect things to happen. And I was like, I'm the living water. And I went, oh, okay. Now I know what you're telling me. And I don't know, though. I'm like, I'm still going to do both. I'm like, I'm in Utah County. I can't do this. I'm going to do both. Mm-hmm. And so I went back, and the second time I went is when I had met with the senior pastor there, and basically got the impression that's like, and I want you doing what he's doing. And I went, and then me and God had to have an argument because I went, no. I don't want to be doing what he's doing. Because if I'm doing what he's doing, that means I have to speak. I can't do both if I have to speak.
Yeah.
I can't be in the back if I have to speak. And of course, we all know who wins those fights.
Yeah.
God wins. And I remember driving back to the sacrament meeting, and that's when "All In" by Matthew West, I don't know if you're familiar with the song, was just getting big on K-Love, but basically he talks about how he's stepping on middle ground and how he can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
He has to jump into the deep end and go all in. Like there's no fear in this. And I was like,
You can't serve two masters.
yeah. And so I'm sitting there going, so I'm driving to sacrament meeting going,
Wow.
Thanks. Yeah, that was the last sacrament meeting I attended. I attended and that told my wife I couldn't go to the priesthood meeting afterwards because I was like, I just can't. Went home and I just told my wife, I said, hey, I'm done. I can't. Weird enough with that though, I met with my pastor, the guy who I was a pastor with in Idaho, his worship pastor. And we had been talking, I'm like, hey, I'm out. And by the grace of God, this time my wife and my kids got pulled out as well. And I was talking, we met for lunch. We met halfway and he's actually the one that gave me this ring that I wear. It has "In God We Trust" on it. It's actually made from a coin. And we were talking and he said, it's really good. He's really good. I'm really glad to see you out. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? He goes, I've been praying ever since you went back in.
Yeah.
Because I knew you were supposed to be in ministry. I was praying for you to get out and get back into ministry. And I'm like, oh, it's your fault. Like, oh, and everything just played out exactly the way you wanted it to. He's sitting there with, big old grin like a cat that just ate a canary.
Yeah.
But, and so, from that point, and then I also had a wavering, and then from that, we started telling our parents, things like that. Weird enough, my parents, I reached out to my niece, who's actually Wiccan, when everything went down, because she's been pretty accepted by the family.
Right.
And so I reached out to her as kind of like, hey, how did you do this to not disrupt everything? Because you're not LDS. So how did this work out? Well, she ended up telling my brother everything, who ended up telling my whole family. So I didn't have a chance to tell them.
You trusted a Wiccan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so everything blew up in my face there. And there was a big period of like disownment. And then my wife told her parents, and there was that whole issue. I ended up losing my job because I was at a company that was founded by 3 BYU graduates. The company was like 98% LDS, and they just made it really awkward after I left, to the point where they just basically pushed me out. And I lost all my friend groups that I had, just gone.
So it cost you everything.
It cost me everything.
You're ostracized.
Except for my family.
Yeah.
Except for my immediate family.
Yeah.
But I can't remember who said it. I think it might have been Spurgeon, who said, you'll never understand what having Christ is like until it's the only thing you have. And I can tell you it's all worth it. But
Amen.
You don't know what it is until it's the only thing that you have. I think it's just an experience that, if you don't, sometimes as Christians we can take Christ for granted. We're not, as you were talking about in the Q&A, we're not thankful for our salvation, and that can be an issue.
Yeah.
When it's all you have, you're truly thankful for it because it's all you have to be thankful for. Everything else, you're like, I'm not thankful for anything else except for this. Right? That's the only thing I have to be thankful for because that's it. And it was tough, and I wavered. I actually thought about going back because I was like, it's just not like it's worth it, but I can't. I don't know if I can sustain. And that's actually how I got connected with Apologia. Was Jeff's Gospel for Mormons video. I seen a couple of his things and pulled that up on YouTube, and don't think I pulled it up. I think that I would honestly, hand of God, providence, watch this.
Yeah.
And after hearing the gospel and the LDS gospel put side by side and saw them compare and contrasted, I saw it and went, well, now wavering's done. And I showed my wife, I said, watch this.
Right.
And she's like, and she had just barely came out. She came out a little bit after me. And she had been wavering, and she's like, you know what? I don't like some of what he said. Because she still had that thinking, but she's like,
Yeah.
but I can't deny anything he said. And I'm like, yeah, wavering's done for you too.
Right.
Yeah.
And then just went headlong, and through his providence, through his grace, like he just connected me with and surrounded me with people that became like family. Since then, me and my family, we've gotten closer. They'll talk to me about things now, but I think it would have went over better if I could have explained myself in the beginning.
Right.
Yeah.
But I wasn't able to, and instead it just came across as, oh, he's just doing this thing where he wants to be a preacher now. Oh.
Right.
Didn't you say they, at the time they treated your Wiccan relative
Better than
you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is interesting. I think a lot of LDS communities, well, a lot of LDS members who leave will have that experience. I think if you're atheist, it's not as bad for them because they feel like you're gone and they can possibly save you from that. But if they can, the light of Christ is hard to fight against.
It's like a betrayal to them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they know that if they were to try to win you back, it would be very, very difficult because they can see the light, and they're like,
Wow.
if I'm gonna have to get that, and a lot of times they can.
Yeah.
My parents a lot of times will come to me and ask me like, well, what do you think about this, or what do you think about this, instead of trying to convince me otherwise now, because they know it's just not happening. Their biggest rule with our conversations now is just we're fine as long as there's no fighting, like debate. And
Sure.
and actually it's been fairly nice. Like my mom now leads primary singing, and she wanted Liam to watch, like, who's my youngest son, he's 4, wanted him to see some of the things, but she was sensitive enough to be like, well, listen, you watched them before, and if anything disagrees with your theology, don't show him. But
she respects you there, yeah.
she's like, I'll be respectful, and
She's
like, I just think it would be cool for him to see Grandma sing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, I can respect that.
Yeah.
And actually, some of the songs are like, "Do as I'm doing, follow me," which are like just like nursery rhyme type things, and I'll have him watch that and be like, "Look, it's Grandma singing." Look, it's Grandma singing.
Well, it's one of those things too. When you think about the world of cults, and you have sometimes like the cult identity, as we wrap up here, versus the true identity, and like Steve Hassan talks about this. But I think a lot of times that, you're sort of the knee-jerk reaction of someone who's a cultist or is in a cult is they want to do the shunning, the disconnection, and the cutting off. But then, but all of a sudden I don't get to talk to my grandkids, and that's a byproduct of my loyalty to this organization. But then it's like that shifting between, that the human side of me. Like, like I want to have kids one day, and like that's the miracle that's staring back at you, and the child staring back at you, coming into this world, but then also like the ability to be a grandparent. And that's, I know people, and it's on a personal level, people who can't be grandparents to their kids, and having that, it's a very difficult thing when you're put into that situation. And so it's almost like, I've seen it happen before, where sometimes there's sort of this mutual agreement that you kind of go along to get along, or you disagree, let bygones be bygones, and that's always kind of an interesting thing that I've seen.
Well, for me, just Matthew 10 was real. And when I say that, when he says, I did not come to bring peace, but I come to bring a sword, and where he talks about if you love your family more than him, you don't deserve him, and that was actually comforting
Wow.
during that period, because I'm like, well, they're wanting, or how I felt during that period is they're wanting a religion over a relationship, and that's okay for them. I'm going to disconnect because I have Jesus, and that's okay.
Right.
And that's, if they're wanting this, that's going to be okay, because I was told this was going to happen.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like a shock.
Yeah.
And I didn't really let bygones be bygones. I've just let my hands be clean. I've given them gospel presentations on multiple occasions at this point. Now it's Sola Deo Gloria. It's not me that's going to convert them. It's the Holy Spirit. So I've given them the gospel presentations. My hands are clean at this point. I'll let the Holy Spirit do what it's going to do, and I'm just going to let bygones be bygones and love on them.
Yeah.
But they know where I stand.
Yeah.
They know where I stand.
Right. Yeah, I think. Well, this has been really good. I think that one of the things too, like as we wrap up here, is that you've had a whole slew of events, from going to being an adopted child in a Mormon family, becoming an atheist, having this Marilyn Manson atheist occultism stint, back to Mormonism, and then this includes motorcycles, ghost hunting, and all these things, and
it's like a movie.
It's So I'll definitely be the first to buy your autobiography when it comes out.
I want Brad Pitt to play me.
Yes. That's perfect. Yeah. He's like,
but he has to get a good hat.
Yeah.
It sounds like a Quentin Tarantino movie. Like,
Yeah.
no joke.
I know. Uma Thurman's even.
My Uma and Thurman. This is as good as my Black Flag moment. Conspiracies.
Oh boy.
You
just line that up for me.
I know, it's good. But this is just those cool things too. Just because, kind of looking too, just at the infrastructure in Utah, and just personally, I felt just kind of just overwhelmed yesterday, just seeing the Mormon temple being excavated, because like I said, it was just sort of, you got to see it for what it really is, just this corporation that is just manufacturing this manufactured identity that is full of, it's a fraud, and it's false, and it's leading people to hell. And that's just hard to listen to, but I think sometimes it can be overwhelming looking at the big picture and being, and us being at the Mormon temple and being chased down by the Mormon men in black, trying to chase us down. The security with their little things going on. But
we have cameras everywhere, just so you know.
Oh, I know. They were following slowly back to our car.
Yeah. Well, at the Provo City Center temple, we actually get along well with we do street evangelism down there. We get along well with the security guard now. Because there was BLM protests down there, and a guy actually got shot down there, and so we're seen as the good thing to have around. By the grace of God, He allowed something else to happen so that we look good. And He even says that we have the light of Christ, like the security guard does. Yeah. But he actually, when we came out and we were talking once, he actually pointed to each tree that had a camera. He's like, "We have a camera right there, right there, right there." I'm like,
wow.
Huh. I don't even see him. He's like, "Yeah, you won't."
He's like, "See these birds? They're not real."
So that's like more of a little the eye also where it's like, I can see you.
It is.
They're baby pigeons.
Yes, because the birds aren't real.
Birds are real.
Yeah, but but going back to just seeing the big picture, but really seeing on a serious note, God kind of working through all these unique, particular events, leading up to you being very involved with Mormon evangelism, being involved with what's up here, and even on levels with the End Abortion Now, and even in many ways, we're going to be working together with this church plant and helping get the gospel out here into Utah. And, and we know that there's probably many people that right now are kind of in the process and where they are right now where you were at the end of part 1 or the beginning of part 2.
Right.
And that's why we need to be out there, swinging that gospel axe out here in that cultish embedded place of Utah. So I think this has been a great discussion. So unless you guys have any last words, I think we'll wrap up here. Any last thoughts?
It was great.
I think we covered everything.
It's good to hear your story.
Good, because my eyes are getting kind of. I'm gonna have to get toothpicks between my eyes because I get a little tired here. But It's all good. All right, so if you guys enjoyed this series on Mormons, ghost hunting, motorcycle gangs,
And Quentin Tarantino.
and Uma Thurman, and all that sort of stuff, go ahead and share this episode. Comment on social media. Let us know what you thought. And as always, if you want to support The Cultish Show, go to thecultishtshow.com. Go to the donate tab. You can donate one time or monthly if you choose to do either. Thank you for supporting the ministry. And on that note, we will talk to you guys next time on Cultish, where we enter into the kingdom of the cults. Talk to you guys soon.